Hello and welcome everybody to Life and Leadership with David Gadberry. I'm David Gadberry and I'm so glad you've decided to join our leadership community today. I want to encourage you, you can be a part of our leadership community every week. We do these podcasts and you can subscribe to them on iTunes podcast and just about any other podcast app out there. And then also you can go on our YouTube channel, Gadberry Leadership Coaching, and we have these podcasts live on video as well. So we'd love for you to subscribe to those. And if you go to the trouble of subscribing, then please rate them and review them. That just helps in building and expanding our audience so that we can reach more and more people, because honestly, that's what we want to do. We want to add value to as many people as we possibly can. Here at Life and Leadership, we call it that because we believe that a lot of times leadership is communicated in a very sterile way. In other words, if you do A, B, C, D, you'll achieve E. And the truth is, life doesn't work that way. But leadership does work in real life, but we have to talk about it in a real life context. So today, Connor and I are going to be discussing influence in real life, using your influence in a real life context. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to Life and Leadership with David Gadberry. We're excited that you're joining our leadership community. There's a lot of information about leadership, but a lot of times it's too sterile for real life. Life is messy and leadership can be messy. Here we talk about real leadership in the context of real life. If you're a leader looking for tips, insight, and wisdom on leadership, you can follow David on social media. And for upcoming group coaching experiences and more, go to Gadberry.org. David is the lead pastor of Summit Church in Canyon, Texas, and we would love to invite you to be a part. For more information, go to yoursummitchurch.com. This is the Life and Leadership Podcast.
Hey Connor, how's it going?
It's going great.
You know what, man? I love to talk about leadership. We talk about it a lot.
We sure do. Yep.
And I think that a lot of times we can talk, like we always talk about, leadership can be so sterile. We treat it as if it happens in a vacuum. A lot of times we have a tendency to want to work out formulas because it seems easier in our mind. If A, B, C equals D, then that makes more sense to me than A plus C plus F plus L, which is really a lot more how life is.
Yep.
It's very rarely uniform. It usually doesn't stand in line for you. Things most of the time don't function and operate and turn out like you think they're going to. There's a lot more work, a lot more effort, a lot more strategy, a lot more funding that's needed for whatever it is you're trying to do. And I think we forget that we talk about this a lot, but I think that we forget that the process is the point. I tweeted this the other day, and I really think it's true that the result for people like us, A-type personalities, leadership-oriented people who are ready to get it done, make it happen. We always think about the result.
Yep, very much so.
And we think, if I can do all this, then I'll get to that. And that becomes our obsession.
Right.
That becomes everything to us. And we talked about this a little bit on the podcast the other day. But the truth is, why does that end result have value?
Right.
There's really no value in that end result in and of itself. What makes it valuable is what we went through to achieve it.
Yeah, I think you said something the other day that was really good. It may have just been in a conversation we had. But you said something to the effect, like if people flew to the top of Mount Everest and told you, hey, I flew to the top, but then another person came up and said, I climbed Mount Everest. Who do you think appreciates it more and learn more lessons?
Right.
Because if you just fly to the top, I mean,
you didn't go through what it took to get to the top.
Right.
So what makes the top valuable?
Yep.
It's not just its inherent beauty.
Right.
But it's the process of achieving it.
Yep.
So I think a lot of us, we need to get past this thing that, leadership is just this A, B, C, D, and we just need to understand there is a process here.
Yep.
And the process is important. And what will make the end result valuable is me consistently walking through, appreciating the process and working that out in my life.
Yep.
And when I do that, then when I get to the height of the mountain, when I get to the top, or when I reach the goal, or when I exceed my expectations, it's that much more valuable and that much more palpable because of what I went through to get there.
Yeah, and like what we're about to talk about, influence. People are influenced by people who have been tested. If you haven't been tested, not very many people are going to be able to trust you.
Right.
And influence is a lot about credibility, and we're about to dive into that. But
so influence, what we want to talk about today is influence in the context of real life. John Maxwell, who I follow after, and I'm a certified member of his leadership team, and I went through the process of that with their organization, and really blessed by that. It's a really great thing. But one of the things he says, and obviously he knows far more than I do, and he's had a lot more experience than I have. But he says, I think there's probably more to this.
Sure.
But he has a phrase that he says, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Now, I think there probably is more.
Yeah.
But I think if you really want to bring it down to bare bones, that's what it is.
Yep.
Influence. And so we can talk today about how to obtain influence. We can talk today about what influence is. We can talk about in real life, why people are influenced by other people, why some people are easily influenced and others are not. We can talk about how influence should be used and how it should not be used.
Yeah.
We can talk about that fine line between influence, persuasion, and manipulation.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of times we misinterpret and misunderstand what influence really is.
Yeah.
So today I just wanted to have this discussion about influence, and then even maybe before we're finished, just kind of look at the life of Jesus and the way he influenced people.
Right, because we come from from that background.
Right. And even if you're not a believer, you can look at Jesus in a historical context as a leader and see, wow,
what a gravitational pull he had.
The way he influenced people. And I think a lot of people look at influence and they say, well, a leader is influential because they're a leader and people follow them because of the leader. But the truth is, leaders are not influential because they're leaders. They're leaders because they're influential.
There you go.
And influence is more than... Matter of fact, it has nothing to do with fame.
Influence is intentional.
Right. Influence is not about celebrity.
Yep.
It's not about fame. It's not about people seeing you.
There you go. Yep.
It's not vanity. It's not, look at me. That's not influence. People might say that, well, what about those charismatic leaders that they come out and they're just so vibrant and everybody follows them because blah, blah, blah. And the truth is some people like that truly do have influence. But I think we're confusing their influence with their personality, because you don't gain influence just by being popular.
That's right.
You gain a minutia of influence by being popular, barely. And because celebrity influence is a lot like positional influence. We understand positional influence to be the lowest level of influence. In other words, I'm following you because you have a position.
Right.
And that's good for a leader, because a lot of times the first entrance into someone's life to influence them will be based on a position that you've been given or you've earned. But it's only going to take you so far. And what I have found in 30 years of leadership experience, people aren't going to climb the high mountains with you because you have a position. People are not going to go through the low valleys with you because you have a position.
That's right.
If it's time to jump off that cliff and take that risk and say, come on, everybody, you're going to turn around and be all by yourself if all you have is a position. Because positional influence or positional leadership it verges on coercion. In other words, you have to follow me because I'm your boss, or you have to follow me because I'm in a position that gives oversight to you. But the problem with that is they're not following you because their heart is with you. They're not following you because they are persuaded by the vision that you have.
Right.
They're not following you because they see a higher calling and think, I don't know where that guy's going necessarily. I don't know where that gal is going necessarily, but I want to grab a hold of their jacket and ride this train wherever it's going because I can see there's something. And there's a reason people get to that point, and it's not positional leadership. So I want to talk about real life context and how influence is developed, and then what that influence causes. And then I do want to talk a little bit about, because we are talking about real life, and we can talk about this in a business perspective, we can talk about it in a church perspective, but I want to talk a little bit about how influence can be turned negative and used in the inappropriate way.
I think it's important to talk about, because sometimes to know how to do something right, you need to know the wrong usage of it to interpret, well, what's right about it? I need to know what's wrong. And I think that's going to be good, and it's going to shed some light. But influence, we're about to start talking about it a lot, but influence, if you want to know who a leader is, who moves the room when they walk in, who brings life and doesn't suck the air out of the room, but everybody lights up when they walk in. If you're a leader and you want to bring leaders with you and influence them, look for the ones who add to the room,
right? Who
bring life and good ideas and solutions. And when they talk, people's heads turn. And I'm sure we're going to talk about how to become that way, but personality is so fleeting, talent, all of those things. I mean, anybody can really have personality and be kind of like bright and, you know, fun and quirky and all of those things. But who has something to say when the going gets tough?
Well, and bottom line, it comes down to who has the influence.
Who has,
like,
exactly.
If you're a new leader to an organization and you walk in the organization, you have the position of leader. Maybe you've earned a position. Maybe you've been hired in a CEO role or something of that nature. There's somebody leading that organization because the vacuum of leadership fills in. So if there's an organization without a leader, somebody will become the leader.
That's right. And
there's all different levels of leaders. So a lot of times when you come into a new organization or a new environment, you have to figure out who the leader is. And you have to begin to develop influence with them.
That's right.
If you're going to lead the whole group.
That's right.
And some people will say, well, that's just a power play, and that's just, no, they just need to get in line and do whatever I say. Well, you can say that all day long, but that's not reality.
Do you want it to die or grow?
Right, because real life doesn't work that way. And why have a fight over something that's not worthy of a fight?
That's right.
And so, find that person who carries the influence. And you're right when you say, like, if you're in a room with a group of people and you start bringing up ideas and you notice that when you're talking or anyone else in the room is talking, that everyone else in the room looks at a certain individual to see what they're going to say.
Right.
That's the leader.
That's the one.
And now that doesn't mean to say that that's always positive. Sometimes people who fill that void aren't really good leaders. But the bottom line is that's how influence works.
Yeah.
Now, influence is developed by relationship. I just don't think you can have influence without relationship.
Absolutely.
Now, but how does a leader do that?
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it this morning. How does a leader do that? Because you if you're growing an organization of any size at all, you cannot be in personal relationship with everybody. I mean, even Jesus himself only was really tight with 12.
And even within that.
Right. There were three. And then even in that, there was one that he really connected with.
Right.
So you can't be
everything to everybody.
Right. You can't. It's impossible. You can't have an in-depth personal relationship. Well, then how do I, if influence is relationship, it's based on relationship, then how do I gain influence with people if I don't have relationship with them?
Have relationship with the right ones. I think, not, it's kind of like what you said. People have a cynical view of this, and so they think, well, that's just a power play. You're just picking favorites. Mm-hmm. No, I understand how people work. And if somebody is leading them inadvertently, because sometimes we just subconsciously follow those who are actually leading.
Yeah.
Am I building relationship with that person? And through that, I can influence my organization or the group of people I'm trying to lead, because I want to build relationship with them. And what is it about them? Why do people follow them? And really, it's only positive in my mind. I don't see really a lot of negatives, because if it's just what Craig Rochelle says, if the leader gets better, everybody gets better. And if the leader doesn't get better, it's going to be a detriment to everything we're trying to achieve. Growth.
The idea is, as a leader, that I can't come into an organization and say, and just admit I'm not necessarily yet the real influencer in this room. Right. And by the way, leaders should be in a lot of rooms where they can say that, because if you're only in rooms where you're the major influencer, you're not growing, you're not developing. But that's another subject. So the only thing that keeping you from acknowledging, hey, there's another influencer here or several influencers here that are more influential to this group of people than I am.
Yeah.
Right. If you cannot put your ego aside long enough to embrace a relationship with those people.
Yeah.
And because one way or the other, whether they're doing well or not doing well, if they have the influence, you have to have a relationship with them to at some point, and you can say it this way, in not manipulative terms, but you're literally leveraging their influence.
Yep.
And you're giving them the honor that's due them, and you're not afraid to go, hey, I'm the leader here, and everyone needs you to follow with me. No, that's silly. That's ego.
That's ego.
But you're not afraid to go, hey, listen, obviously you've got a lot of influence here, and tell me about yourself. Tell me about how things have gone here. What do you see as some ups and downs? And investigate that. Build relationship. Add value to that person. Let them know, hey, I respect and honor the fact that you've been able to, lead in this scenario. And I think leaders who do that are much more apt to have a successful long-term leadership era with that organization, because they're not insecure. They're not ego driven.
Right.
They're not about me. Listen, the only reason people get into those little scuffles about who's the boss is because they don't have confidence. That's it. It's because they feel like they have to prove they're the boss instead of just being the boss.
If you have to say you're the boss, you're probably not the boss.
You're not the boss. If you might have the title boss, but you're not the boss.
It's like when you get married and you have to say, well, I'm the man of this house. You probably ain't the man of the house.
You might be the male in the house, but let's just say, you ain't the only one wearing bridges up in here.
Yeah, exactly.
And we believe in partnership and marriage and all that. We're just using that as an analogy. But the truth is that insecurity, that egotistical mindset only hinders. It steals influence from you.
Yep. And it is detrimental to whatever you're trying to lead. If leadership is, and I think a big part of it is loving people. If it's about loving people, you'll do what's best. And if there's a leader in the room before you get to somewhere, or you understand that necessarily you're not the leader, it's okay, even if you're positionally higher, quote unquote, to acquiesce a little bit to the person that's moving the things in the room. If it's about pushing the vision forward, take a back seat every once in a while. It's not the end of the world.
Yep.
I mean, it's all ego.
Yeah. There's a man I really admire. His name is Gary Skinner. And some of the people from his church are going to be here at our church here. With Total Church. Gary Skinner's from Canada. Few years ago, over 30 years ago, 35 years ago, something, he just felt led in his heart that God was telling him to go to Kampala, Uganda, and start an English-speaking church.
That's awesome.
And that sounds great and like no big deal, but when he made that decision, Idi Amin was still, wreaking havoc over Uganda. And so it was dangerous. It was so dangerous that his overseers, his supervisors in his denomination that he's a part of, told him no. He requested to be sent there, and they said no. It's too dangerous. You can't go.
How old was he?
I don't know how they were, but I don't know. He wasn't very old.
Yeah.
And he went anyway. He just said, I know what God's telling me to do. And he packs his family up and he goes.
Man.
And the story is so elaborate. I couldn't even go into all of it. And I wouldn't do it justice if I could. But he is a very influential person, very godly, very led by the Spirit, and he's influential. And you can see it when he's around, and you're in Watoto and he's around. They're the founders of that church, and it's a great, amazing church. And they're in the middle of transitioning, new leadership coming in a couple of years. But one thing I love about him is he's got his lead team, and he calls himself first among equals. So because he's the founder, and because he's the one who took the risk, and he's the one that came and put it all on the line, you would think that he'd be like, "Oh no, I'm the dog."
Yeah, if anybody's getting credit for leading this thing.
And all these leaders on his team are Ugandans. They're from there.
Wow.
Most of them. There are some Westerners on their team, but it's in large part people right out of their church.
Goodness gracious.
And he uses that terminology. It's the first I really heard that terminology, and I met them years ago. And you can see it in their organization, like when you're around them, that he is very influential, but that he has allowed his team to share the influence with him. And and when you're so confident that this is who God called you to be, and this is what God's told you to do, I'm not going to sit here and vie for the position to be the leader. I am the leader, and I don't need, and so I'm not afraid to say, hey, you're also a leader.
Yeah.
Hey, and you're also a leader.
How do we expect to build other leaders?
Right. And real leaders, remember this, Connor, and most leaders quote this, and I don't know who originally said it, but the truth is, real leaders do not raise up followers. They raise up leaders.
Man.
If you're really leading, if you're really a leader and you have a legacy mindset, you're not thinking, I got to get people to follow me.
Yep.
You're thinking, I've got to develop leadership in people. It's a whole different mindset.
Yeah.
And that is really where influence comes into play. Are you so egotistical and so confident, so insecure in yourself that you won't share your influence with anyone? That you won't let other people use your influence?
There you go.
For fear that you might not be considered the one who did it? Are you afraid and so insecure that you won't release and delegate effectively to people who are on your team because you're afraid something might go wrong, or it won't be as high quality, or that you don't want them to ruin what you've built? Well, what'd you build it for?
Yeah. Right.
So influence is very important, but it's got to be used well. Yeah. And it's got to be used right. And I think we gain influence by credibility. Influence definitely comes through relationship, but in that relational context, I think we would be remiss if we didn't go back and talk a little bit about the Pareto principle, because we asked the question a while ago, how I can't be in relationship with everybody.
Yeah.
How do I? And you said, well, you need to be in relationship with the right people. Well, what we mean by the right people is the people that you believe are the people who are,
they're reaching
and they want more, and they're expanding their horizons, and they're growing and they're developing, and they would be considered the top 20% of your organization.
And how do you identify those people? In my mind, how you identify them is who is bringing up suggestions on how to push it forward. Yep. Who are sending you text messages saying, man, I researched this and I think this might be a good idea. Sometimes leaders get insecure about that. Man, they're trying to take my spot.
Right.
But my God, no, they're just trying to help.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when I get texts that say, "Hey, what if we?"
Oh,
that word, "what if?" I just love that because I know that behind that's coming a solution or an idea. Now, we may or may not do it. It may or may not work.
Right.
But you've got somebody there that you're going, ding, ding, ding. I can invest in that person.
Yep.
I'm not going to have to pull them.
Mm-hmm.
I see so many leaders that they like a certain type of person, and maybe, just maybe, it's because they're talented.
Yep.
And they will spend months and years trying to pull that person to the forefront. And they got somebody over here that doesn't appear as talented, but they're like, give me more and I'll do more. And one of the major problems we have in leadership circles is when it comes off, when a real true leadership that's reaching for responsibility, they're a real leader, they want more, they'll expand themselves, they're growing, and you treat them like a workhorse, but then you stage the talent guy when he's not doing his job or she's not doing her job, and it makes the people working with you feel like you take advantage of the people who are really leaders, and you are far too lenient.
I think that's like the quickest way to lose influence, if we want to say that.
No, it is. And here's what happens. That kind of leader, if they have real leaders under them, they will not stay. They will not stay. Ultimately, they're going. Now, they may be really loyal, really committed. They may stay for a while, but ultimately they're going to go into an environment where they can be released to lead, whether it's their own leadership thing or if it's another organization that will say, hey, we like who you are. We like what you're doing. You're not flashy, but man, you get the job done.
Could you imagine putting a bald eagle in a cage? Like when I go to the zoo and I see bald eagles that their wings have been clipped, it's one of the most devastating. I know it's kind of a funny thing.
It's like you stole the dignity from them.
In the dream.
Yeah.
Like it's like you're caging up an eagle. Yeah. Like if I did that to anybody I'm leading right now, they sent me a suggestion and I shot it down every time.
Yeah.
That would be like clipping an eagle's wings. Yeah. And I don't want to do that.
Because you have no idea what's really in there.
Could open up so many things.
Just believing in them could change everything. So what we do is we have this tendency to drag people along because they appear to be talented or we like their personality but we really haven't looked in. Yeah. We haven't really paid attention to who's reaching. Yeah. Who wants more or who's leaning on their talent. Yeah. And I'm not saying that you don't want to have talented leaders. Oh, thank God when we do. But the truth is everybody who's talented is not a leader or doesn't behave like a leader. Yeah. And so you like somebody's personality and you want to stage them and you want to make them visible and what we often do is we lead them to a place that their character is not capable of sustaining.
It's so sad.
And then on the other side, you've got a guy who really should be getting the opportunities and being set free, but you're not because maybe they're a little different or maybe they're not as talented or maybe they're not as cool factor or whatever. And we got to just really be careful about this because we're making decisions on who the leader and who has the potential based only on personality and talent. And those do not make up.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like Rudolph's nose still lit the way, man. It still lit the way. Yeah. It's kind of goofy and corny, but it still lit the way.
Right.
And everybody's got something like that. Yeah. And I think we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, but a part of influence is pulling out the gold in people.
It is.
I mean, Rudolph couldn't run with all the other guys, but man, he lit the way.
Yeah. We talk about here in at Summit a lot that potential is like buried treasure. I do a talk on this for Gadberry Leadership Coaching all the time. That wouldn't it be ridiculous? I mean, absolutely ridiculous if I said to you, I'm a billionaire. And you said, well, I don't see the manifestation of this billionaire. You seem to have all these limits. Yeah. Oh, no. I've got the money. Well, where's the money? It's in my backyard. What do you mean it's in my backyard? Why would you bury billions of dollars? Well, it's buried in the back. I got it. Right. That's how potential is. Now listen to what I'm about to say. Potential is like this billions of dollars inside you. It's this treasure.
Yeah.
But if it's buried, now think about this.
Come on, man. You get there.
It's worthless.
Yep.
Think about having the potential of creativity and the potential of leadership and the potential of changing lives and the potential right on your team. But because you're afraid to share your influence and you're afraid to believe in them and you're afraid to set them free to come on, do what you do.
Right.
It stays buried. So you got this valuable thing until at some point they're going to dig it up themselves.
Yeah.
And they'll go find some place to use it.
Yep.
So what we try to do is say, look, the most valuable thing that we have, the most valuable commodity we have is people. Period. Always people over things. So we're not developing followers. We're developing leadership in people. We're not filling rosters. We are building people.
Yep.
Right. And so I think, Connor, we really have to get to that place where we understand the thing that pulls the gold out, the tool that digs the treasure up is influence. So how do we obtain that influence?
Yeah.
And how are we using that influence?
We talk about relationship is a big part of it. Until I get to know somebody, you're kind of like, until I get to know somebody, it's really hard to call out the gold in them because I don't know, like, how did you grow up? Like, what was your life when you were growing up? And as you start talking, it's in relationship, it's like you give people a little more like credibility and a look inside every time you meet with them. And so it's like you're sharing stories with them that you normally wouldn't, like you're building that friendship with them. And I have friends now, and some of them I lead here at the church, that we can almost talk about anything and it allows us to speak into each other's lives.
Right.
But if we didn't have that relationship, we would never do that.
Right.
There would be no influence.
Right. So if you're going to lead people and you're going to influence them, you have to know them. Now, that's the subjective side of it. Now, the other side is we do objective testing as well, personality tests, giftings assessments, all that. So we're not just looking at somebody and saying, hey, I think you might, but we're taking what we know of them.
Right.
The Bible says, know those who labor among you.
Yep.
So we take what we know of them and then we put it alongside an objective assessment of them.
Yes.
And we say, all right, here's what we see in you.
Yeah.
Now let's give you a starting place for this. Yeah. And then we grow from there. But let's go back just one minute.
Yeah.
Getting back to that relationship. So if I'm a leader, how can I and if influence is built on relationship, then how do I get relationship? And how can I be in relationship with everybody? Well, that goes back to the Pareto principle. Pareto principle says 20% of people do, give 80% of the money. 20% of the people do 80% of the work. 20% of the people.
It's absolutely true.
Now, 20% of the people are going to serve 80%, of the time.
Yeah.
So what we have to do then is we have to decide. Now, what I'm about to say is going to get kind of tough for people, and it should be a revelation for some folks. We have to decide who those people are.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we talked about already is they are people who are reaching for responsibility.
Yeah.
They're people who are always learning.
Yes, they are.
And they're teachable.
Yeah.
You're not having to pull on them.
Yeah.
They're pulling on you. And matter of fact, sometimes you have to put your hand out and go, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
We'll get there, but let's all go together.
Slow down.
Sometimes they get out ahead and you have to go, hey, that's not the way we do that. I love your initiative. Here, let me give you some coaching on that.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd a whole lot rather that than to have somebody that you're just dragging. Okay, so those people who are reaching, those people who are learning, those people who are teachable, those are part of that probably top 20%.
Yep.
Those people who are serving, and they don't need anybody to see them. Right. And they don't care if anybody sees them. And, they'll just do whatever needs to be done.
Yep.
That's just now we're talking top 20 here.
Yeah.
And then we have to make a decision as leaders that we're going to invest in that top 20 with the expectation and knowledge. We're teaching them that they should be also developing leaders around them and creating their own top 20. Now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So how do we, here's one thing that we have to think about. Okay, we have to think about, if that's the way we're defining that, and that's the way we're finding those people, the number one thing we have to do, because of the law of attraction, we have to realize that there's a law of attraction that says you're going to attract what's like you.
Yeah.
But then there's also another law called the law of the lid. This is in 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership with John Maxwell. So, and that law says that there people who are above your lid basically won't follow you. So if I'm a 3, 5, 6, and 7s aren't going to follow me.
Right.
They might start with me, but then they're going to go, man, this guy just can't get it together.
Yeah.
You know, and like when you have an organization, whether it's a business or whether it's a ministry or whatever, and you've got guys who are real leaders, guys and gals who are real leaders, and you need them to invest in what you're doing. You need them to be a part. You can't be, well, the word that came to my mind is not appropriate. So I'll just say it this way. You've got to be developing yourself all the time. If I want 7s and 8s, then I better be working. I better be learning at a 9 and 10 level.
It's like, I don't want to be, because of family reasons, and we've talked about that on a previous podcast if you want to listen to it, but you never want to be a workaholic. But you should have, it shouldn't be a weird occurrence for somebody to come up to you and say, man, I don't know if you noticed, but you're always learning, and you might need to slow down.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's not in an unhealthy way, but you shouldn't have people never coming up to you and saying those things, or your team should never not see you putting something in a chat with them saying like, hey, I'm learning this. Yeah. I would love for you to come along with me in this journey. Or when they ask you questions, you have answers. Right. Like,
here's how you know.
People know your slip is showing, and they know you're not learning when you're they're like, man, he is off today. They may not tell you, but everybody's talking about it.
Yeah. and here's the deal. You know, people who won't do that are, you said it already, people who would consider that work.
Yeah.
Like, I meet leaders all the time that they're like,
oh gosh.
They're like, if the learning and the education and development of their own personal leadership doesn't fit within the context of their work time,
get out.
They won't do it. Or if it requires more money from them, and they might be people who have a lot of money, but they're like, there's this assumption on so many leaders' parts that I've arrived. You know, I'll never forget going to the first Catalyst with Andy Stanley and John Maxwell. And I can't remember who it was. I really feel embarrassed that I can't, but I think it was Howard Hendricks. I'm not sure. But it was an older gentleman that had mentored both of those guys. And he was definitely in his late 70s, if not early 80s. And he got up and I'm not necessarily saying this is the way you have to do it, but he literally said every year of his life.
Oh yeah, this story. Yeah.
He goes to college and takes another class, a class that he's never taken before, that he's never learned anything about. I mean, this guy was old. I mean,
why? People think why?
I was shocked.
Live your life. You don't have to go to college.
And what he was saying is, if we're really going to be effective, if we're going to make a difference in the world, if we're really going to have influence,
come on,
we have to be constantly growing, because that's what will make room.
Brother had more degrees than a thermometer.
Yeah. And I read another article the other day that was just shocking to me. There was this college in a small community, I don't remember what it was, but they ended up naming the college after a gentleman that lived. He left his whole estate, which he wasn't rich, but he left his whole estate that he had when he died to the college. But he was an older gentleman, and they named the college after him. And you want to know why? because he had taken every class in the catalog.
Yeah.
In the catalog, every class. Now think about that. Now why? I know that sounds extreme and people are like, oh my God, I got out of college and I'm never going back.
Yeah, people are overwhelmed right now. They're going into depression.
But look, we've never lived in a time, Connor, where there was not more like podcasts like this. We've never lived in a time where there wasn't experts on every corner. You have to pay
resources.
Nothing. Right. And then there are opportunities for investment in yourself. And I'm not just talking about conferences. I'm talking about, that when I joined the John Maxwell team, that's why I did it. I really wasn't going to start a company. I was just going to go and just grow and develop. Yeah. And then I just felt like the Holy Spirit impressed on me to come home and do a leadership company, and that would give me influence in some different arenas. And so that's what we did. But the truth is, I was just in a place where I said, all right, I've been learning this, I've been learning that. I need something. I want to go to another place. And that curiosity is what makes a good leader. That desire to know more, that admission.
Yes.
That there's so much I don't know. I mean, Connor, I'm not a kid. I'm 51 years old.
Right.
But I'm telling you right now today, I feel like I know some things, right? But I feel that there is so much I don't still know.
Isn't there there's like a pool, and I'm not very young. I mean, I'm not very old. I'm not very young. I'm not very old. But there's like this pool of, man, I still feel inadequate in some areas. And I just want to go. It's like Leonard Ravenhill said, and this applies to a Christian worldview, which is ours, a Christian background. But he says when you enroll into the University of God, you enroll and you never graduate.
Right.
You can say the same thing about leadership.
Yeah,
when you enroll to the University of Leadership, you enroll and never graduate.
You never graduate. Your graduation is moving from one level to the next.
Yeah.
It's like a kindergarten graduation or a junior high graduation or a high school graduation. And it's like you're in a perpetual growth. And it's leaders who lose sight of that and get bored with that. And it's not something you should do out of obligation because I need my people to see that I'm doing it.
Right.
It's something that, if there's something you can't do, learn. If there's something you don't know, learn. Yeah. I see a lot of people going to conferences today, and we go to conferences. I love going to conferences. It's just it's a refreshing thing. But I see a lot of people going to conferences for some kind of answer.
We're not conference crazy, though. There's a conference crazy.
Yeah, there is. And here's the deal. They're looking for some kind of knowledge, some kind of answer that's going to fix or give a solution to whatever problem they have. Now, here's the problem. The only thing that's going to fix really what they're dealing with is a consistent, disciplined life. And so many of us are wanting some kind of just give me an answer so that I can just apply that and it can be done.
Yep.
And life just doesn't work that way.
It's funny because, we all read books and books are great. Podcasts are great. I mean, we're doing a podcast right now.
Right.
But I can't remember who it was. And he's kind of, I'm just going to be raw with you. He's kind of, sometimes his leadership stuff is pretty vulgar. Like he says vulgar things from time. But Gary V, he's a guy named Gary V. I don't know if you know who he is. But he just talks about, people ask him, do you write books? And he's got a successful company and he's got an amazing mind. And he said, I really don't read books. And somebody said, yeah, he just writes them. Like yelled it out from the crowd. Yeah, he just writes them. And he talks about just live in leadership, live in life. And you're going to, if you're really doing it, you're going to learn the lessons needed.
Right.
Not that you shouldn't invest and read and do things like that.
Yeah.
But man, take the headphones off, get it up off the page and put it in real life.
Right. I think that's why I'm doing this podcast. That's why we call it Life and Leadership, because I see a lot of people. I'll never forget. We had a little leadership college one time.
Like, you gonna play a podcast to your team when they're looking for leadership from you?
Right? Ridiculous.
Gosh.
So I remember one time we were in a leadership context in a leadership school, and I was one of the teachers, and I was going by a group of the students, and they were just going off on one of the people in our organization, and they were just like, man, if they would just do this. And I mean, these guys had been taking leadership classes every bit of one semester.
Lord.
And there was this veteran leader, and they were just railing him. If he would just do this, if he'd be more modern, if he'd do this, just like we studied and blah, blah, blah. And so I just walked up to him. I said, what are y'all talking about? And they were like, oh, we're just saying. I said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so then they started telling me what was going on.
Yeah.
So I just went around the circle and I said, so I want just a rundown. Give me a rundown of what you've done. Not what you've read. I want to know what you've done.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, these guys are 18 years old. They've done barely anything.
Graduated high school.
Yeah, there are exceptional people out there that have done things at that age, but most people, and they hadn't. And so, because people who haven't done anything spend all their time talking about people who are doing something.
Yeah, it's real easy to yell from the sidelines. And
it is.
Because you're not in the game.
Hey, you stink.
Yeah.
Yeah, where are you?
Yeah.
So the point is, I said, so what have you done? And nothing. Okay, and so what organizations have you led? None. Okay, so what projects have you accomplished that made an impact? Well, none. I said, guys, there's a big difference between theoretical leadership and real leadership.
Man.
And I don't agree that you shouldn't read and you shouldn't study and you shouldn't listen to podcasts, because there's a lot to be gained from other people.
Right.
And there's a bit of an arrogance to that. But I understand what he's saying.
Yes.
He's saying when you actually get in and do it, if you have a curious mind and a curious heart and you want to learn, you will.
Yes.
So how does all of this apply then to influence? Well, if you want to influence people in your organization, and definitely that top 20, so that they're influencing others, you have to grow. You have to be curious. You have to know. You don't have to know everything, and you have to be honest about when you don't know.
Right.
Hey, you know what? I haven't learned that. I'm going to figure that out. Do you know? One thing I respect about you, Connor, is that because I've asked you when you came on our staff, I asked you to do a bunch of things that you'd never done before.
Yeah. My whole job.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do anything.
You're like a veteran now. But everything I asked you to do, you didn't know how to do any of it. Some of it I was able to show you. Some of it I was able to turn you on to somebody who could help you. Some of it I was able to get you coaching on or give you coaching on. But then what I've respected about you is that you will go to whatever source you can find to learn how to do something. If all leaders, especially older leaders, would take that attitude to things, it's limitless what we could do. We waste so much, and I'm talking to myself too, we waste so much time thinking we know something we don't know, or pretending we know something we don't know. And then just deciding, hey,
if you haven't heard
we're not going to discover it.
Yeah, if you haven't heard it from anywhere else, listening real close at this, you can learn almost anything on YouTube or Google. Not that it's tested experience and you're not an expert because you looked it up on Wikipedia. But my God, avail yourself to the resources available.
Right. Listen, if there's some kind of technical thing or there's something that you need to do on your job, one of my favorite things to do is go to YouTube and just put how to. Yes. And whatever it is. And everything, all the content on there is not good. Yeah. Some of it you could throw in the garbage and it would, and sometimes it's just a presentation.
That's usually indicative of the amount of views, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're just like, come on, you can find answers. Go take a class. Yeah. So the bottom line is, if you want to influence, you have to be influential. Yeah. And if you want to be influential, I used to teach a lesson to young adults that wanted to do leadership. I used to teach them, you can't be taken seriously unless you take yourself seriously.
Oh,
and so much of the time you got people who they're just going through the motions and they're not learning and they're not developing, they're not growing. They want everybody to take them seriously, but everything is about a theory, an idea, an opinion. Listen, I'm just going to be honest, especially to this culture today, no one cares about your opinion.
Right.
We have elevated opinion to the level almost of theological authority.
Yeah.
It's like my opinion matters. And yes, what you have to say and what you think is valuable, but get to become a person that's so credible that your opinion is being asked of you.
Yeah.
If you want your opinion to truly be valuable, then become that credible, consistent person that's leading and learning and developing, that when you have an opinion because you've been developing yourself, people come looking for you and asking you. And what kind of person is that? It's a person who, even though they don't know something, they will go figure it out.
Yeah.
And they're humble and they don't act like they know it all, and they don't act like they don't need to ask. No, they are always learning. And then when you have people asking you for your opinion, that is when your opinion is really valuable.
Yep.
But we live in a time now where you don't even have to be educated on it. You don't have to have thought about it.
Yes.
You don't have to have any kind of evidence. You don't have to have any kind of sourcing for anything you say. It's just open your mouth and let it flow. And most of what's coming out of people's mouths today is not thought out. It's nonsense. It's based on total subjectivity. It doesn't have any basis in experience or fact, and it's just, this is how I feel. And so I want everybody to know. And I'm just telling leaders out there, honestly, your opinion is unimportant. What is important are the facts. What's important is truth. What's important is influence. What is it that's been said so many times, and we don't even know who started it, but no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So how do I gain influence then?
The credibility, we've talked about it, but when you go to the store, I've seen a guy do an illustration with this, but when you go to the store and you're buying bottled water, if there's two different kinds and one of them has, like for this area, Ozarka water or smart water. So there's one with the smart water label and then the other one's just blank. Which one are you going to buy? If there's two choices, the smart water, because it's tested, it's been trusted. There's something on the label that lets you know it's approved.
Yeah, you don't know if the other bottle's just in somebody's backyard with a hose.
Exactly. And so, like, especially, and sometimes in John Maxwell's he has guys that he's quoted that don't even know who they are. But because John Maxwell put them in his book,
they have credibility. Right.
So what's backing you? Like, what are you credible for? It's like the question you ask the guys. It's like, what have you done with your life? Like, what significant things have you led?
Right.
Nothing. And so
I think too, the credibility, that's what causes people to want to follow you.
Absolutely.
And credibility only comes one way, and that's integrity.
Thanks for being a part of the Life and Leadership podcast all around the world. We have listeners that are a part of our leadership family in Nigeria, Sweden, South Korea, United Kingdom, and all over the United States. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Castro, Castbox, and Podchaser. For video version of this podcast, you can subscribe on YouTube.